Welcome to Tenant Action Today. If you believe in tenants' rights, and if you want to help preserve the affordable housing we have and expand the supply of affordable housing, you have tuned to the right channel. Among other things, you will be able to call in and ask a question about a problem you're having with your landlord or about your rights as a tenant and get an answer from a tenant attorney right here on the air. You will also get some of the latest news of interest to tenant advocates, and on this program, we will show you a short documentary film about an event 2 weeks ago that you should find interesting. Finally, and most important, you will learn how you can help the campaign to restore our rent protection laws, which are due to expire in a few short months and are in danger of being phased out. My name is Michael McKee. I'm a community organizer, and I'm a board member of Metropolitan Council on Housing, the Citywide Tenants Union, and I'm the treasurer of the Tenants Political Action Committee. Throughout the next hour, we're going to give you information about sources of advice and information for tenants. Sometimes this will be on the bottom of the screen, sometimes on a title card, so you might want to get a pen and paper so you can write them down as we go along. My guest for this program is Elizabeth Donahue of the tenant law firm Himmelstein, McConnell, Gribben, Donahue, and Joseph. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. You as
well.
well.
What are we going to do about this weather? It's making me crazy. Yeah, call 311. Keep the heat sheet. Yeah. Exactly. So, what kind of cases are coming across your desk lately?
I've actually
what
seen,
are landlords doing to try to get tenants out?
A lot of Collier's cases.
Really?
Collier's cases, for those who are not familiar with the term, are cases involving an allegation that a tenant has clutter in their apartment. It could be newspapers, it could be clothing, could be any number of things.
Piles of stuff.
It could be odors.
It could be extra furniture.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
It could be sometimes when a tenant moves their items over because repairs are being made in the apartment, it may look like their apartment is cluttered, but it's not actually the way the tenant lives. It's just that this is a temporary situation, and I've definitely seen an increase in Collier's cases where a landlord seeks to evict a tenant claiming that they are really creating a nuisance-like condition.
And there is a legitimate concern here, because if there really is a cluttering case, and for some people this is a mental illness, we have to remember they call it hoarding disease, cluttering disease. I mean, there's all sorts of descriptions, and there's variations on a theme. It can be a fire safety issue. It can be a health safety issue, and where there is a real problem, where there's a kind of disorder, they're difficult cases to deal with because people don't want to part with the junk, the clutter. I've had a couple of experience myself as an organizer with cases, and they're not easy to deal with always.
They're not, and unfortunately I had one recently where long-term tenants, rent-regulated tenants, got a notice claiming that their apartment was a Collier's, and they were so nervous that they started to pack up.
Oh my God.
And to actually call in relatives from across the country to come and get furniture, etc., and they were going to move out of New York. That's how nervous they were.
Oh dear.
And one of them was disabled. Yeah, one of them was disabled, and another one was elderly, and it was very heartbreaking. So thankfully, they got to a lawyer. We saw the situation, and it's somewhat ironic that many landlords send these notices just to have the tenant clean up. They don't necessarily believe they will succeed in an eviction action. But of course, if they can get a rent-regulated tenant out, particularly, let's say, in a building where it's a co-op or a condo, they would be quite happy about that.
It's a gold mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with these particular tenants, when I called up the lawyer and I said, not so fast here, we're cleaning up and you're going to come and look at it, and whatever your issues are, we will address them. He was very upset.
He wanted the tenant out.
Because he wanted the apartment.
He wanted the vacancy. Yeah.
Exactly.
He didn't care if they cleaned up or not.
Exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes my experience has been that tenants are too embarrassed to talk about this.
Absolutely.
And yet avoiding the issue is not the solution.
No, there's a lot of shame about it. I mean, if you think about what you have in your apartment, you don't really want to go through all of those papers and boxes, et cetera.
We all, in New York City, we all live in small apartments. I mean,
right.
It's not like you're living in the suburbs with a big house.
Or you have
and
a
an
basement
attic.
exactly.
Right.
And in some parts of the city, I know Park Slope, where they don't have even closets. So people's stuff is more likely to be out unless they have an armoire or whatever. So, you know, but nonetheless, I've seen many people who do take the steps to clean up be much happier. And they get rid of things which they say, you know, I should have done this a while ago. I feel a lot better.
Yeah. And so this is sort of like the new trend, or I mean, because landlords sometimes, you know, there have been periods where landlords brought a lot of non-primary residence cases claiming the tenant was not using the apartment as their primary residence. Owner use cases where the landlord says, I want the apartment for myself or for a member of my family. Colliers is now sort of a new trend.
You know, I don't know if it's a trend per se, and I do think that there are trends which reflect the economic climate, because sometimes landlords don't want to go to court and spend the money of going to court, say in a non-primary residency case or an owner's use case. So some of that is economic driven. And I don't know if this is particularly a trend, but I have seen Colliers cases, and sometimes they arise because a tenant needs work in their apartment. So the landlord comes up, and then the landlord goes in and sees and says, oh, I don't like what I see here, or I smell a smell, or whatever the situation is. And also they will take pictures of, and you know, pictures that make the apartment look bad, and then they're off to the races on a Colliers case.
And they start a proceeding.
Exactly. So it's hard to say whether it's a trend per se, but I'd say if anyone does have trouble where they think they might be, you know, a landlord might claim that sometimes just going and getting the Container Store or someplace to make
there are sources of help. There are organizations that help with these kinds of cases. And people should reach out and ask for help. Okay, before we take calls, here are some brief news items and announcements of interest to tenants. In testimony this week before the Joint Fiscal Committees in Albany, Mayor Bill de Blasio laid out a compelling case for home rule. The mayor had demanded that the state legislature give New York City the power to raise income taxes slightly on high-income residents, those earning $500,000 or more per year, in order to provide a reliable income stream to fund universal pre-kindergarten education for 4-year-old children and after-school programs for middle school students. The mayor is also calling for home rule powers to decide where the city should place red light cameras, which currently have to be authorized by Albany. It seems that the push for home rule is gaining momentum. Can home rule over rent and eviction protection laws be next? Mayor de Blasio has said he will go to Albany with tenants to fight for this year and next year. Last week, Governor Andrew Cuomo sent his executive budget to the state legislature. On the good side, the governor has included several reforms to the state's campaign finance system in the budget. His budget closes the LLC loophole, which allows big real estate developers to set up separate limited liability companies for each building that they own and contribute up to $150,000 each year from each LLC. This loophole has allowed Leonard Litwin of Glenwood Management, for example, to contribute $800,000 to Cuomo since 2010 and hundreds of thousands of dollars to Senate Republicans. If this provision remains in the final budget, which is supposed to be adopted by April 1st, from now on, LLCs will be treated the same as corporations, as they should be, which means that Litwin and other developers will be limited to contributing $5,000 per year to all candidates. The governor's budget also restricts contributions to party housekeeping accounts to $25,000 per year, which now have no limits. The budget also implements a system of public financing for elections, but this would begin only in the election 2 years from now. By including these reforms in the budget, the governor has made it harder for the legislature to block them. These reforms will go a long way toward taking big money, including real estate money, out of our elections. But the Senate Republicans will resist these reforms, especially taxpayer-funded elections, So tenants must pressure their legislators to make sure these items are not removed from the budget before it passes. Of course, there are bad features of the executive budget. Most notably, the governor did not heed calls from advocates to include the 30% rent cap bill for tenants living with HIV and AIDS in the budget. Despite the fact that 30% of income is the universal standard for all other housing programs, some 10,000 tenants who receive rent subsidies from New York City from the HASA program for HIV and AIDS patients are forced to turn over all of their income to the city except for $12.36 per day, which is all they have left for all other needs. This is a major injustice that needs to be corrected, and it is disappointing that Governor Cuomo did not include the reform in his budget because that would make it harder for the legislature to block it. 4 years ago, both the State Senate and State Assembly passed the bill, but Mayor Mike Bloomberg persuaded Governor David Paterson to veto it on grounds that the city could not afford it. But there is hope. Advocates led by Vocal New York are lobbying the governor to include the 30% rent cap bill in the amendments to the budget bill that the governor must submit to the legislature by February 11th. When asked if he supported such a move at the joint fiscal hearing this week, Mayor Bill de Blasio responded strongly in the affirmative, stating, quote, "We must do everything in our power to bring relief to these New Yorkers to keep them in their homes." So that's the latest news briefs, and we'll see what happens with the budget. Personally, I don't trust the governor not to agree to take some of the campaign finance stuff out because it's not clear that he really wants some of these reforms, since he's benefited from this loose system himself. Yeah. So what would you advise, how would you advise a tenant who called you or came into your office and said, my landlord's claiming that I've got a mess in my apartment and that he's going to try to evict me? What would you tell people to do?
Okay, I would say I'm coming by to see it.
You would go yourself?
I absolutely would go.
So you would know then how bad it was, or
Correct.
if it was nonsense or whatever.
Correct. Be aware that landlords often turn around. As I said, if you're asking for a repair and they turn around and they say there's too much stuff in your apartment, that to me is a classic deflection, which I'm dealing with right now in a case where we really needed help. It was the landlord's responsibility to fix something. They go into the apartment and then they point the finger at the tenant and say, you're a Collier's. I mean, that is like the classic deflection of a problem to me. And I find it, particularly harassing because the landlord has an obligation, period. Also, if, one person's Collier's condition is not another person's Collier's condition.
Exactly.
Now, if the alleged Colliers, and there are people who have
We should explain, by the way, where this phrase comes from, who the Collier brothers were.
The Collier brothers were two brothers. Actually, I think they've been in the news in the last year. It could have been
there was a
museum piece.
There was a big spread in, I guess it was in the New York Times.
It was in the New York Times.
Yeah.
And it could have been over the weekend or something.
Because they were found dead in 1947 in their brownstone.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's Collyers, right?
Colliers with a Y.
Right. So anyway, I mean, what I do is I look. If let's say there may be something in the apartment that is in fact worrisome. Not everybody who is a Collier's collects newspapers. Some people collect other things, like cats.
I once had a run-in with a tenant who had the version of this illness which is called shop and drop, where she would go out and buy a sweater and bring it home in a shopping bag and put the shopping bag on a chair and never open it.
Wow.
And then go back, a week later she brings another, and she had all of these shopping bags filled with new clothing that she had never worn and just piling up. And I learned from a nonprofit organization that was helping her that this is referred to as shop and drop.
Okay, I've never heard that before.
It's mean to laugh, but it is really kind of amazing.
I mean, the other thing we do is we have a person we use to go into an apartment to help organize.
You have a
This
consultant.
is a consultant. She has a team of people. If we need a quick turnaround, she's always there, so she'll get it done. And she charges an hourly rate, so it's not. I mean, you have to anticipate it's going to be that, but sometimes you need that. You need someone to say, okay, this goes, this stays, this is a maybe. Like work through the process.
What do you do if the tenant doesn't cooperate or is resistant? Some of them are.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And some people eventually do come around to accepting the help because if there is a problem, they will be in court. And
they might get evicted.
I like to be in between the court and my client, obviously. That's why I like to go right away. And everybody in my office, we go right away to see what it is. Again, we're going to come back and say, it's not that bad, or it's really, there's no odor.
And then you might call up the landlord's attorney and say, you don't really have a strong case here.
Right, and here are the photos I took, so go away. What are you talking about? Or it's explainable because you're doing work. You're doing like the living room, so everything is exactly. So everything's in the dining room, or whatever. So anyway, I mean, hopefully they work it out, and it's a good result in the process.
And when these cases go to trial, are they what we call curable? I mean, can the tenant cure if you go to trial and you lose?
Well, it depends. In housing court, as you know, there are eviction actions based on what we call nuisance. And then a violation of the lease, and most violations of leases can be cured. Most violations of a lease can be cured.
And most nuisance
cannot, because you're saying there's a course of conduct.
Right.
So again, if you are a tenant, and you've had a few complaints against you because of the condition of your apartment, we're getting into a pattern that bothers neighbors, that bothers the landlord.
If they have to bring you to court 2 or 3 times, for example,
right,
then you might not be able to cure. A cure is where the tenant you lose the case and you say, okay, I'll clean it up now.
Correct.
That's curing it.
So a good example of that would be, let's say you installed a washer dryer in your apartment, you had no authority to do that under your lease, the landlord found out, you would get a notice to cure, you'd have an opportunity to get rid of it. You would do that, but if you didn't get rid of it in time within the period of the notice to cure, and the landlord brought you to court, you still would have an opportunity to cure it, but you may have to pay the landlord's legal fees. So you want to be on top of all these.
Yeah, that could be a big problem.
Right.
Yeah. So how many of these cases actually go to trial?
Very few. Because usually what happens is once everybody gets into court and everyone assesses what's going on, including the court.
The judge is usually not eager to evict somebody for this.
And as I was saying earlier in the show, many landlords really don't want to evict people for this reason. For whatever the reasons are, let's say some elderly population, maybe some people can't get out as easily, they can't get the help. Most people don't want to evict an elderly person, particularly when help is usually available. I have a lot of people call yet another one of these cases where the son of the tenant called. He doesn't live with the mom, but he said, I'm at my wit's end. I don't know what to do. I've cleaned it up. I try to go over there. And, we try to get people to help, whether it's a professional, whether it's a family member, whether it's the tenant themselves. Sometimes just doing some 5 things, lifting up the carpet, getting something new, that might lead to the apartment looking much, much better. But I had to give some, rather heartbreaking advice to people sometimes, like, no, you really can't have a 4th cat. It's not going to help you under these circumstances.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that can be, that's a loser.
Did you turn a
so.
Yes.
But, I mean, the people should understand that you can be evicted from a rent-regulated apartment for reasons other than not paying the rent. And a lot of tenants don't understand that.
Really?
Yeah, I find people don't really understand that at all. I mean, there are any number of reasons you might be facing eviction, and nuisance and cluttering is one of them. But
holdover proceeding.
Whenever it's a holdover proceeding, meaning an eviction proceeding, it's much dangerous. If you are sued for non-payment of rent and you ultimately can pay the rent and you follow all the procedures, you won't be evicted. If you are taken to court in an eviction proceeding, a holdover proceeding, you might actually lose your apartment. And what's the mix, generally speaking? Used to be, it's been a long time since I've done work in a housing court, but it used to be like 75% of the cases were non-payment and 25% or some mix like that were holdover cases. Is that changing over time?
I'm not sure what the statistics are, because we discourage people to, hire a lawyer for non-payment. We don't want, if they're having trouble paying their rent,
You don't want to spend it on legal fees.
Exactly, because legal fees are
Figure out
expensive.
a way to get the money together so you can pay the rent.
Exactly, unless it's something complicated, like
Right.
if there's an environmental problem in the apartment for which you do anticipate calling an expert witness. That could be, anything from bad leaks, mold. I had one case where there was a mercury spill. Things that really require
That could be
you
very
putting
dangerous.
on. It was extremely dangerous, very odd. It came from some pipe maybe, but nobody really knows. So if there are particular reasons, lead paint, tricky.
There might be, if you have young children in the apartment and
Yeah.
you have lead paint.
And you're withholding your rent, you don't want to go in there necessarily,
Right.
because you could be signing away, any rights, and that would be particularly bad. So most lawyers are going to see holdover actions. And again, some tenants are under the misguided thought that because they have an apartment, they can keep it and not be there. And that's absolutely not the case. I mean, if you're going to be in a rent-regulated apartment, you have to actually live there as your primary residence, sleep there
People think
183
you can
nights
just hold
a
on
year.
to it forever and
You can hold on to it.
and come in once a month.
Sublet it. I mean,
Yeah.
I had somebody call me recently who said, I'm subletting it every 2 out of 4 years. And although you can sublet it for 2 years with
That could
permission,
be very dangerous.
but you're talking
Yeah.
about someone who's doing this,
Repeatedly.
as a serial
Yeah.
situation,
Yeah.
and then once is found out, is going to have
Might
to
be in
meet with
trouble.
the landlord,
Yeah.
and then is completely freaked out, like, I kind of want to come back to my apartment, but not for a few years. And I'm saying to myself, that's not really what rent regulation is for. It's not like I have a valuable thing, a rent-regulated apartment, that I'm going to use, as an asset. You use
Right.
it is valuable, but it's for when you live
It's
there.
supposed to be your home.
Exactly. Well said. It's supposed to be
All
your
right,
home.
with that, we will take a phone call. Hello?
Yes.
Hi, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. I've been living in this apartment for almost 37 years, and I never had something that I had to pay for the use of the washing machine. For the last couple of months, the former owner started charging us $16.82. So they sold the building, and the actual owner still charging me. And I don't think I should pay for it. What is the real answer to it, and what should be my position?
Okay, when did you put the washing machine in?
I've been having the washing machine since I think a year, almost 35 years. Yeah.
And you're the one who put it in?
Yes.
You're talking about a dishwasher or a clothes machine? To wash clothes?
Yes, to wash clothes, yes.
And do you hook it up to the sink, or is it permanently installed?
Yes.
Which? You hook it up to the sink?
Yes, it's hooked up directly to the pipes that goes.
Okay, let me ask the question a different way. Is it permanently installed?
Yes, it is.
It's not a portable that you move over?
No,
Okay.
it's not.
Yeah, I've never actually seen a washing machine. I've seen dishwashers, but okay. This is a very good question.
Yeah,
How would you advise the caller?
I don't know what the amount is tied to, the $16.
$16.82. That's what they're charging me extra for it.
$16.82, and is it the same amount every month?
Yes, indeed.
And they're saying it's for the washing machine.
But it was never on my list.
Yeah.
I've been living in this apartment for 37 years. It was never in the list. It's not in the actual list that we signed about 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, and it doesn't have to be in the lease. I mean, there is a provision in the rent stabilization system that allows landlords to collect a surcharge for certain appliances in some circumstances. What we're trying to figure out, and we're probably not going to be able to give you an absolute yes or no answer, because it depends on a lot of we would have to know more of the factual situation. But there are some circumstances in which landlords are able to impose a surcharge for appliances, even if it's not in the lease that you can't have it. I mean, your lease might say that you're not allowed to have a washing machine. You might want to check your lease, and in this case, it would be the original lease that would control this. Do you by any chance have a copy of your original lease? The one you signed. You do?
I mean, now on the lease that I signed through the years, he said that I have to pay for the...
No. The question is, do you have the original lease when you first moved in? Do you still have it? You do? Good for you. Most tenants don't, certainly after 35 years. But you need to check that original lease, and it might say that you're not allowed to have a washing machine.
No, it doesn't say.
You're sure of that?
It doesn't say at all.
I mean, I think the statute of limitations is run on it.
Yeah, 35 years.
So I think you're okay in having it. And I think you're right, Michael, that we have to see what the basis is for them claiming you owe this. It's wear and tear in the building, or did they have to go to DHCR to get this approved? We don't know. I mean, we don't know.
Where's the building? What neighborhood?
It's in Inwood.
Inwood.
Yes.
You might try going to the Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation. They are at 76 Wadsworth Avenue.
76 Wadsworth Avenue?
Wadsworth Avenue. And take your paperwork with you, because take your original lease, take the most recent lease, take any notice you've received from the landlord, a rent bill that you've received from the landlord, and ask somebody to sit down with you and go over the paperwork. And then they might be able to give you a better answer. But there are circumstances in which the landlord is allowed to collect this kind of charge, but it's not automatic, and you should not assume that they're entitled to it. So you're quite right to question it, but I don't think we're going to be able to give you an answer. I mean, I would have to look at the paperwork before even venturing an answer.
Okay, sir.
But
thank you very much.
People should be aware that, air conditioners, washing machines, dryers, dishwashers, these are all things for which the landlord might be able to impose an additional rent increase. But it's complicated, and they don't always have the right to do that. But Liz is probably right. They probably can't. They're not telling you have to get rid of the washing machine, right?
No. Well, what they told me is if I don't pay, to get rid of it.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm guessing there's some claim it's a wear and tear on the building. They have to spend more water or something.
But, I mean, they would only be able to make you get rid of it if there were some kind of leak. You were causing floods, things like that.
Right.
Or repair it or replace it. But I would advise you to go to Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation and ask somebody to give you help there.
Okay, sir.
You can also call them. I'm trying to remember the number. 822-8300, I think. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's the number.
822?
I think it's 822-8300, 212.
1800.
Yeah, look them up in the phone book. There's 76 Wadsworth Avenue.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your
Thanks.
answer.
Good luck.
Okay.
Boy, these are complicated situations. And air conditioner surcharges. These are people are always questioning that.
Right.
And this questions of whether it sticks out, how far it sticks out over the windowsill, and I mean, wow.
Maybe I guess I should have told them if you could go online with DHCR. If the caller's still listening, to go online at DHCR and see if there's a fact sheet that might point us in the right direction.
They do have fact sheets, that would be helpful, and that's on the screen right now. So caller, if you are still listening or watching, write down what's on the screen right now, and that's a place you can call or go online to get some advice about this. Okay, now we have another call.
Hello?
Hello, you're on the air.
Yes. I I'm curious to know. I'm a senior citizen. I live in NYCHA. And
Okay.
I'd like to know, is there any type of organization that can help me clear out my apartment, help me get some of the things that I need to. It's clutter. It's clutter.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, there are such places. Do you mind telling us the neighborhood, not the address, just the neighborhood?
Manhattan.
Upper Manhattan. Okay. Upper Manhattan meaning West Harlem, Hamilton Heights.
I would say Manhattan Valley.
Manhattan Valley. Okay. There are organizations. If you call Met Council, we will refer you to a local organization that might be able to help you. And that number is on the screen. There is a hotline every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 1:30 to 5. And that's the number that's on the screen right now. And you can talk to a live person and get advice. But good for you. I mean,
Yeah, good for you.
better to deal with this before
Yeah.
it becomes an issue with the landlord. And NYCHA can be just as nasty a landlord as any sometimes.
Believe me, I know. I'm 74, and I try, and I just take from one side to the next side. And I just need someone to help me say, you don't need this, you don't need this, you don't need this. And, I'm ready then. Maybe someone else can have it, but that's not going to be my problem. I just need to clear the air.
Okay. Well, I think there are a couple of organizations that might be able to help you. And if you give Met Council a call, we will try to refer you to a source of help.
Okay.
Okay? Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Good luck.
And I don't know if there are any senior organizations.
I wonder if the One Stop, whatever that place is called on 96th Street, it used to be on 96th Street, the One Stop Senior Resource Center, whatever those called. I wonder if they must have some experience with this.
It's a problem.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a growing
and it's
problem,
usually
unfortunately.
older people.
Yeah.
Who have this problem.
And, again, it's mobility, getting rid of stuff you can't always get. And a lot of people also wait for Salvation Army to come in. I mean, sometimes you just have to get rid of stuff and not wait to get rid of this dress size with there and, whatever.
This doesn't fit me anymore.
Get it moving, right.
I'm going to lose weight. I'll get into it again.
I've heard that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now we have another call. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you. I'm a rent-controlled tenant, and I've been in my apartment for 33 years. And
Are you sure you're rent-controlled and not rent-stabilized?
Rent-controlled.
Okay. All right.
And, I want succession rights. And
okay.
Oh, okay.
All right, then it makes sense.
2009.
Okay. All right, good.
Okay.
And I was told when my grandmother was receiving scree before she passed, 06, I was told by one of the representatives at the Department of Aging that for rent-controlled tenants, there is a ceiling amount where landlord cannot go above.
For SCREE, for Senior Citizen Rent Increase Exemption. Hello?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but that was for her, but she's deceased now.
Yes, and you're not a senior citizen.
Right.
Okay. So the benefit for the Senior Citizen Rent Increase Exemption, SCREE, ended when your grandmother died.
Right.
So you would then have to pay the legal rent, the legal rent-controlled rent.
Okay.
But what I'm not sure I understood exactly what the question was.
I was told. Well, I guess like you said, it was meant for the SCREE.
To be eligible for SCREE, you have to be 62 years of age or older.
Right.
And you have to be below a certain income threshold, which is currently $29,000 a year household income. Okay. It's tragic because many senior citizens have incomes of $30,000 or $32,000 or $33,000, which in New York City is not a lot of money to live on, especially paying high rents.
Right.
But they're not eligible for SCREE because you have to have an income below $29,000 a year.
Okay.
But the first requirement is you have to be 62 years or older. So you're lucky that you were able to exercise your right of succession.
Oh, you have no idea.
And I imagine you had to fight them.
It took me through it.
I imagine you had to fight them.
Oh my God, you don't even know. For 6 years,
Yeah.
Ever since she died.
Wow.
I had to fight. I had to get an attorney, and I paid thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yep.
But it was worth it.
Absolutely, because now you have a home.
I have a home.
Yeah. Now, did you get a final judgment in court, or how was this? Was it settled?
I got a final judgment in court.
Okay.
And they were charging, arrears, false arrears, which I had to take them back to court and fight that. But now I was thinking, and maybe I just heard people talking. I thought with rent-controlled tenants there was a certain ceiling.
Well, there's a legal rent under rent control. Do you get a notice every 2 years called maximum base rent?
You know what, sir? I used to. We haven't gotten that in like 4 years.
Well,
and I believe that's because of violations.
Well, it probably is either that the landlord has not applied.
Okay.
Because the landlord, unlike rent stabilization, where rent increases are pretty much automatic and are tied to lease renewals, under rent control, the landlord has to submit an application every 2 years to be accepted into the program. Some landlords don't bother applying. If a landlord's only got like 1 or 2 rent-controlled apartments left in a building, they might decide that the paperwork and the trouble is not worth it. But if they don't apply, they don't get the rent increase.
Well, you know what?
The other reason they don't get it is that they apply and they are rejected because of building conditions, violations, and that's also a superior feature of rent control to rent stabilization, where landlords get the rent increase regardless of the condition of the building, unless the agency orders a rent freeze or a rent rollback. But
well, there are 90 tenants and there are only 11 rent control apartments.
That's unusual that you would have that many.
Yeah.
Where's the building? What neighborhood?
In Harlem.
Okay. Do you have a tenants association?
Yes, I do.
Good for you. That's
Yes,
the
sir.
most important thing.
Yes, sir.
If you don't get the notice, and you get this every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
Beginning in an even-numbered year.
Right.
So the MBR this time, for example, would be for 2014, 2015. If you don't get that notice from the State Division of Housing, they're not getting any rent increases. Your rent is frozen at what it was 4 years ago.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, unless they do major capital improvements. Anything? Okay. What am I missing? What else should I tell them?
I think you covered it.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
great.
It sounds like they probably applied and didn't get accepted because they have violations.
Yes, sir.
So.
Thank you so much.
Good for you for fighting for your home.
Thank you.
And good for you for having a tenants association.
Thank you so much.
Good luck. That's exciting.
Now, before we take another call, we're going to give you a special treat. We have a short film. This is a film about a fundraiser that was held on January 10th, at which Tenants PAC, my organization, honored our new public advocate, Letitia James. The film was produced by Alessandro and Maeve Cavadini, a father and daughter team. We'll be back when it's over. Enjoy.
In a rundown shanty on the other end of town, you must pay the rent. I can't.
Congratulations. Thank you so much.
There lived a lovely damsel in a raggedy gown, but her hero never came along. On the first of the month, it was money that she lacked. You must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. So the landlord tied her to the railroad track, but her hero never came along. You must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. You must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. Oh, what a cruel world when you haven't got a cent and the hero never comes along. Now the moral of the story is that if you must pay the rent, but you can't pay the rent, you gotta tie your landlord to the railroad track, because the hero will never come along. You gotta go down and join the union. You've got to join it for yourself.
My name is Michael McKee, and I'm the treasurer of the Tenants Political Action Committee. I've asked Anderson Bisame to introduce Tish James because he worked with her when he was an organizer in her city council district, and he has some stories he wants to tell about who this woman is.
Good evening, beautiful people. How are you? I was working at Pratt Area Community Council in
the Fort Greene section of Brooklyn, Clinton Hill section of Brooklyn, a building on Lincoln Place, no lights, no heat, no hot water. It's like early December, winters come, get off the Frenton Avenue shuttle, and walk a few feet. It's right by Eastern Parkway. For those of you who know Brooklyn, now this is prime area, and I'm saying to myself, well, of course, there are no services here tonight. The landlords are using their usual tactics to try to drive folks out and get the building. I don't want anyone to leave. Because any of you who are organizers know this, and folks who experience this know this, that once one tenant leaves, and a second tenant leaves, and a third tenant leaves, the morale goes down. Why stay? Letitia James was there. New York 1 wasn't with her. News 12 wasn't with her. There wasn't a news reporter with her. She had put a phone call in saying there was an emergency and she was going to wait there until HPD came. Tish was there until HPD came. No fanfare, just doing what her constituents elected her to do. This is not rhetoric, it is pure, driven action. And I remember sending out one of my first messages on social media saying, my goodness, I wished I lived in her district so I could vote for her. So please, without further ado, I've spoken too long, please, let's welcome our new public advocate, Letitia James.
Let me begin with the inauguration speech. All I saw was the sea of people, and I really spoke to them. And I called Dasani up because I was not using her as a prop, because I wanted her to taste power and feel power, and because Dasani was me, one of 8 children, she's one of 8, and if I can make it, she can make it, and I wanted her to know that. And so that's why I brought her up there with me, and I wanted people to be reminded about her story, which is the story of all children in shelters in the city of New York. And it was a great story in the New York Times, but lest we forget. And so we have to be constantly reminded of the Dasanis that exist in our society in the city of New York, the homelessness which we all live with, the 52,000 individuals who are going to sleep in our shelters tonight, and 20,000 of them are children. And most of those children look like me. That's why I held her hand. And she is my new BFF. I'm glad that the infill program of the former administration is no more. The Office of Public Advocate publishes an annual list of the city's worst landlords. Not only will I continue this tradition, but for the first time, I will utilize the legal staff of the Public Advocate's Office to represent tenants in the very worst buildings. But who represents the interests, the legal interest of New Yorkers? Who stands up for their rights on a whole, collectively? There is no such entity in the city of New York. And so I see a role for the Office of Public Advocate, because people have said, well, what has the Public Advocate done for me lately? The Office of Public Advocate obviously publishes reports, we do investigations, but one of the things that I'm going to utilize more and engage and try to push the envelope is on the ability to initiate litigation. Both pattern and practice, social impact cases, but really stand up and protect the interest of New Yorkers. And so that's why most of my efforts are on building a very strong legal team in the Office of Public Advocate, because I see a vacuum. We need an army of attorneys, both pro bono, volunteer, retiree, etc., to stand against them together with an arm of government, and that arm of government is the Office of Public Advocate. Mayor de Blasio should move to ensure that the Rent Guidelines Board has an equal number of tenant advocates who represent the interest of New York City renters. what will happen to our city? And you have all of these individuals engaging in land grabs, libraries closing, right? Yeah. They're trying to sell public housing, hospitals closing, the privatization of public assets. And so where are our voices? And shouldn't we have a discussion about where our city is heading? On election day, you know, we made a radical left turn, and we've got to continue on that road to progressive change in the city of New York. So I love you, Bill. See you Wednesday. Thank you.
It was a fun party.
Bravo.
Yeah, and we raised about $12,000 to help elect pro-tenant candidates this fall, because we have a very important statewide election coming up in this year, 2014. The entire state legislature, the governor, the controller, state controller, the attorney general, all of these offices are up for grabs this year. And Tish was really, I mean, I'm really excited about her becoming the new public advocate.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Very inspiring.
One of the things that she's trying to assemble, she's trying to hire more attorneys, and she's trying to recruit volunteer attorneys who will volunteer to represent some, you know, the worst buildings where tenants are really trying to get repairs, and that would be really great if she can make this work.
Yes, I noticed that she talked about senior attorneys and volunteers and pro bono, and wouldn't it be great if they could partner with some people who are in the field and provide resources? It would be fantastic.
Right. Now we'll take another call. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, you're on the air.
Thank you. As a spree tenant, I've been a spree tenant for about 4 or 5 years now. My lease is going to be up in the summer, and I'm afraid that my income may be slightly over the $29,000.
Hey, yeah, that's a problem. When will you know for sure?
I think I know now. It may be like 100 over, something like that.
Oh, my God, 100.
$100 over. Is there anything you can do to reduce your income? Or is it all government, like Social Security, and you can't do anything about it?
Yeah, it's tied up in a way that I can't really maneuver it.
And is this 1 year you are over? Is this a?
No, it's going to be
going forward.
That's the way it is. But I'd like to know: are they going to raise the 29,000 limit?
You know, it's been about, let me think. It's been a good 4 or 5 years since the income threshold was raised, and this is something that has to be done in Albany in the state legislature. It really is time that the legislature did this, and they normally will do this in an election year. So maybe we ought to
add it to the
agenda because it's really a big problem. When do you have to recertify?
July or August. Yeah,
I mean, this could be, you know, the bottom line is if you're over income, you will be kicked out of the program, basically. If you later become income eligible again, you could reapply to get back into the program, but the way it works is that you would go back in at the higher rent. So it can be a very serious problem. Are you in touch with any senior organization, or there are some organizations that give help in this kind of thing? You could call Met Council hotline Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or you could call Housing Court Answers. They have a hotline Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, every day of the week except Friday, and talk to someone to get some specific advice. But if you can't do anything to adjust I don't know what she would do. I mean, if she can't adjust her income.
I mean, there may be somebody at SCRI who can help. Sometimes they're very helpful.
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And if you explain the situation, this is probably unlike, in a situation where you can manipulate your income. What I mean is pay yourself less one year in the case of
or defer income from December to January,
right? Or deregulation, high
with
income,
things like government, payments like Social Security.
2013 income is already, there. We're now 2000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, do you have an accountant?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
maybe.
there are some offsets that can be used to reduce your income for purposes of SCRI eligibility. It might be worth your time talking to someone to see about that. You might want to go to your local city council member, your assembly member, your state senator. Sometimes elected officials have people on their staff who are very skillful and knowledgeable about programs like this and can be helpful to constituents who have this kind of problem. Not all elected officials are good at this, but many of them are. And you might want to talk to your state legislators about putting in a bill to raise the income eligibility. I mean, it's time. It really hasn't been raised for several years now. And you might want to explain to your state senator and your state assembly member, I'm going to be out of luck here if you guys don't pass a bill in Albany to raise the threshold.
Who would that be for North Manhattan?
I'm sorry?
Who would that be?
Well, what neighborhood do you live in?
Inwood.
Inwood. Depending on where the lines are, tell you what, rather than speculate, give Met Council a call and we'll tell you who your elected officials are. And you should go to them and say, please put in a bill, introduce a bill to raise the threshold so I don't lose my home. Because it really is unfair. I mean, I talked to a tenant a couple of weeks ago she was like in her 70s and her income was $31,000 and change. I mean, she needs relief and she can't get into SCRI because she's over income. So it really is time that they do this, and often the state legislature will do this in an election year because seniors are a reliable voting bloc, and it really makes them look really good. So give a call. We'll tell you who your elected officials are. Find some source of help because you might be able to discount your income. There are very limited numbers of things that you can use to reduce your income, your net income. And there's been legislation that would extend that further, but it's never passed. For example, some legislators have introduced bills to allow seniors to reduce their income based on medical bills. Unfortunately, that hasn't passed, but there are other offsets that you might be able to, if you're only $100 over, you might be able to get, your income down to the point where you would still be eligible. Right. Don't just give up. Don't just despair.
Oh, no.
I mean, but give Met Council a call, and you might want to talk to somebody at Met Council about lobbying your elected officials about this.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, and talk to your neighbors too.
Thank you.
Okay. Boy, that's
painful.
That's rough. That's terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember how many years it's been since they actually raised the threshold.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was 2006, 2005, 2006 that we last saw the increase, the bump up to.
And do you remember how they came up with that number?
Well, it was phased in over a period of years.
Yeah.
I mean, they added $1,000 over a period of 4 or 5 years until it reached 29,000. But that was the end of it. I mean, after that they didn't raise it again.
Okay.
So, well, we had some interesting calls.
We certainly did.
Yes, and I'm glad we had a chance to talk about Collier Brothers cases because that really is a fascinating and difficult kind of thing for tenant advocates and attorneys to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And viewers, you might want to Google Collier Brothers and remember Collyer. Quite a fascinating story.
Right. I also, there are shows on television now, the hoarder shows, so it has become more, out there. And I agree, it's an avoidable eviction, and believe me,
people should do whatever they can to avoid eviction.
To avoid eviction. Correct.
Well, thank you, Liz.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Yeah. You've been watching Tenant Action Today. We're on every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. Thanks for watching.